This is my pleasure to greet you all well, kindly devoted their time and effort to be part of this important discussion where we want to hear the experts' insights on anti-corruption courts. And I'd like to thank our distinguished guests from other countries, panelists from Ukraine, Philippines, and Armenia, who has graciously agreed to share the experiences of their home country. And I will speak very short, and I don't really have any slides or anything like that, just to give you the very descriptive and general context and where we are, where Mongolia stands in terms of policy dialogue on the anti-corruption court. So before I start, I also have to say that the Open Society Forum, even though we are one of the leading think tanks and independent think tanks, especially in the justice sector, we take this role, the setting the context role, with a great humility. And I see the experts in the justice sector taking part in this discussion. I see a lot of familiar names, and I hope that you are gonna add on this context as we reach to the feedbacks and the question part of this discussion. So in Mongolia, you know, the corruption has been rather invisible monster, which had the most visible consequences, which is the case not unfamiliar, no stranger to many countries in the worldwide. So last 4 years, the government of Mongolia has been fighting the corruptions, I would say blaringly, with like aggressive action plans, national policy papers, and whatnot. So last several years, I would say since 2021, to be precise, the talk of establishing the special anti-corruption court has been emerging in the media, websites, news websites, public speeches of the authorities, specifically the prime ministers and the speaker of the parliament, also during the policy discussions. And I would like to pinpoint the few factors that contributed to this unfolding, why we all of a sudden started talking about it. So first factor, of course, the 2021 special session of UN General Assembly on combating corruption and its recommendations served as an impetus. Next, Transparency International Corruption Perception Index score dropping in, specifically in 2022, I believe. The report urged the government to take a drastic action about the corruption, about their agenda, their strategy about fighting the corruption. Thirdly, following the 2019 constitutional amendment in Mongolia, the judiciary of Mongolia has experienced a major legislative reform into 2021, where establishment of the circuit and specialized courts were allowed. The drafting of and adoption of the law on court establishment, or in other words, a court structure, has happened in last couple of years, starting from 2023 and unfolded in 2024. In last June 2024, we had the law on court establishment adopted. So that law have provided inception of the two new specialized court. One is a family court, and the second one is a small claims court. And during this process, the establishment of the anti-corruption court has been quite active, and legislators were very much pushing forward the idea of having the specialized anti-corruption court. And however, there was like very strong pushback from the experts and lawyers during this discussion. And the biggest concerns were whether executive, who was like blatant about criticizing the judiciary over the years, are trying to have their own court to use for their witch hunting under the name of fighting corruption. And we have not seen the impacts of the new law just recently passed 2021. The new judiciary law has been enforced just less than 2 years now, and the impact is not yet to be seen. So why not we see whether this legislation is actually going to help in overall fighting the crime, including the corruption. So the new law, of course, requires the executive to be funding this reform in order to see the results. So we had a very strong, even though we didn't have a specific provision in the new law on the court establishment, we had the legislators pushing forward including the provision in the resolution to adopt the law to mandate the executive to further research the feasibility of the anti-corruption law and the anti-corruption court, and really come up with the optimal, policy options. So the intention is still there. So this discussion has paused very briefly in this summer because of the parliamentary election took place in June. And now that next week we're coming up with the local government election unfolded. So from October on, the new parliament, the extended parliament, will be operating in a full force. And I believe the strong intention is still there. And many of the the politicians, especially from the ruling parties, been expressing the needs to have the anti-corruption court. So we would really wanted to be as prepared as possible for this dialogue that's expected to happen in coming months. So this is like the assumption, and it's nothing really. As I said before, with the great humility, we're just really sitting as one of the active players in the justice sector reform to be contribute this dialogue with much of an insights and knowledges and experiences from other countries. And there has been like a couple of policy analysis took place since 2021 as we started talking about having the anti-corruption court. So the first one was commissioned by the General Judiciary Council itself. They used to have a research unit under them. Now it's transferred to the Supreme Court. So this research institute has conducted the feasibility analysis. And the report suggested that specialized court and anti-corruption court could be efficient by keeping the caseload for a single judge at optimal level, and also it can be more efficient if we'll increase the adjudication process streamlined, and then time frame is set for this process. And also it suggested that it's good for the integrity, but even though it says that the integrity is one of the issues that can bring along, the examples they had provided was not a special courts, but like often the case jurisdiction, like swapping the jurisdictions, or so those kind of like these procedural changes. The specialization of individual judges is also one of the issues being addressed by this report. But they had a couple of options. One is like specialization is good. Secondly, some countries dismiss this idea because it can compromise the rotation of judges that is required for the specialized court to be independent. So the report further explores the issues that needs to be addressed if we decide to have the anti-corruption court. So first one is, where does this anti-corruption special court stand in our current court system? And the size of court, which means like the number of judges and staff. And of course, that also entails the issues of selection and appointment of judges who are gonna be working in this courts. And of course, whether there will be special criteria or requirements for those judges. And thirdly, the case jurisdictions and what kind of case is going to be there, covered by this court, and the coordination of the works of this specialized court and the prosecution office. And lastly, whether we will have the special proceedings, criminal proceedings, adjudication procedures for this case, for the corruption cases. So those are the issues that needs to be further researched, and it even though they had provided some of the like comparative analysis of the countries, including some of yours as well, they did not really provide policy like options, specific the options. So it's I would say that the report is quite useful, and it can also lays out a good foundation for further study. And Open Society Forum also asked, we also commissioned the policy analysis on the court structure with the focus on the circuit and specialized court, not necessarily focusing on the anti-corruption court. But as we were doing this research, the discussion was really quite active. So we added on like small section in our report, and our independent research team from the Legal Development Institute found that we currently do not need the anti-corruption court, and they had listed some of the justifications for that conclusion. And the first one was the caseload. Although there's a steady increase in the number of the corruption case adjudicated the courts, criminal courts, the average of 50 cases, it may be like doubled in last years or a year or two, still like very minimum yearly load for a special like independent court. And we have standard criminal procedure for the corruption cases. We do not really have any special proceeding that would require special facility or the separate institute. And thirdly, according to the caseload, there will be one anti-corruption court, very centralized, most likely in the capital city. And in Mongolian context, access to courts is one of the persisting issues as we try to introduce the circuit courts, for example, because of the remoteness of the populations, and access to physical access to court is one of the issues that's always been pressing as we go along with the judicial reform. So this issue will rise again. So lastly, the human resources. So in our context, judiciary is in constant crisis of not having adequate staffing. So by saying adequate, I do not mean not only the number of the staff or the judges who we require to cover the cases. Adequate meaning that qualified candidates for the judge's position. We don't have enough qualified candidates. So the judges are no longer an aspired career for promising young lawyers. To be honest, and I don't think I hope that my colleagues will also agree on that. And so the pressure is high, whereas the compensation is, to be a judge, a lot of pressure, and then the compensation is low compared to private practice and lawyers. So will this special court create divide among judges? What will be the guarantees for the impartiality, independence when we expose smaller number of judges to greater pressure and influence by undue influence? So those are the concerns being raised by the second report. And I'll stop right here. And those we have this policy dialogue going on for the last 3 years, and a couple of analysis being touched upon those issues. And I hope we will have more insights from those who have already been experiencing this practice. And I also hope my colleagues from Mongolia to add on and ask necessary questions so that we will be more informed to engage in upcoming policy dialogue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.